on Initiative Africa. My name is Asha Sampath. Welcome to this new edition of your weekly magazine featuring Africa on the move through smart innovations and initiatives that work. Let's get on with the show with our top stories today. Lukman Lanignon is our guest this week. This entrepreneur of Beninese origin has taken on the situation of the disabled by promoting their education and professional integration. His mission: help young people with disabilities in 4 African countries and in France, but also to organize real advocacy with businesses and public authorities.
Il est d'ailleurs courant.
It is common to see families with handicapped children hiding them out of sight.
Qui les cache à l'abri du regard.
How to put an end to child labour in workshops and fields. In Ghana and Uganda, associations are mobilizing themselves to bring these working children back to school.
They use a lot of the kids, both in the sea and also outside, at the shore, because they use the kids as they go in fishing to help them take out some water from the canoe.
In Uganda, the visually impaired and blind are embracing new technologies. The objective: finding a job.
The prior aim was to make sure that blind persons compete on the job market just like any other person.
We begin this new edition with a grim reality. More than 72 million African children are working today, the majority in agriculture, and nearly half of them are in hazardous work. Since the ratification of the International Labour Organization's Conventions number 182 on worst forms of child labour, some progress has been made. In Ghana and Uganda, governments, the media, local populations and young people themselves are mobilizing to eradicate child labour. Take a look.
In Ghana, it is estimated that between 800,000 and 2 million children are victims of exploitation. That's almost 10% of the total population. This deep-rooted problem is difficult to combat, but there are solutions. They come from the increasing number of organizations working in the field to persuade families to find other ways to send their children to school.
It's all about attitudes. It's all about behavior. It's all about socialization process. So it's not something that you can help people to change. So you have to sit down with them. You have to explain to them the need to support their children to go to school. They need to treat their children as children. And when they understand, then they will help you they will help themselves to solve their problem. So we are not here to accuse them. We are here to draw their attention to see the problem from far.
Sometimes the children themselves take the message to the streets, breaking down taboos and bringing the subject out into the open.
Why won't you ask her why she is crying?
You, the mother, you should ask her.
When there is a problem, you can't face it.
Adelaide, what's wrong with you? Come closer to me. I'm talking to you. Do you think I'm mad?
Adule, what is happening? Raise up your head and let me look at you. Talk. When I was selling the fish, a man said he would buy some, so I should go with him to his house.
What happened next?
When I went with him, he sexually assaulted me. So you went to the house with that man? It's a taboo.
She's such a bad girl. Do you sell in the man room?
On this beach, just a few meters away, children work for local fishermen. They are a cheap, uncomplaining source of labor and are ready to do their master's bidding. The problem has become so widespread that the 12 staff working at the International Needs Ghana NGO devote their time entirely to helping these youngsters avoid exploitation by the fishermen.
They use a lot of the kids, both in the sea and also outside, at the shore, because they use the kids as they go in fishing to help them take out some water from the canoe. And when they come to, they help them to carry the fish or their catch from the boat to the shore. They just give them a token. You know, they are not on any pay, which is very high for them to pay, the fishermen to pay. As for the kids, any token they are satisfied with, or some few fish, they are okay with it. That's why they use these children most.
However meagre their earnings, it may be all the family has to get by on. Far too often when a child is not able to work, the family loses a small but vital source of revenue. The main challenge facing an organisation such as Angela's is to help parents find alternative sources of revenue that leave their children free to attend school. The parents receive financial aid to pay their children's school fees, or have access to microloans to help them set up new revenue-earning activities.
When my child went to school, to compensate the aid he has been giving to me, I'm now roasting barley, and I go to the farm to sell it and to get some more income.
The association keeps an eye on the family's changing fortunes. A monitor regularly meets the parents to discuss what has worked and what hasn't. It isn't always easy convincing parents, and sometimes even their children, that an education is the best guarantee of a better life as an adult. In Uganda, where 40,000 children still work in the country's tea plantations, the media have joined a campaign against child labour. The Voice of Turo is a very popular radio station in the west of the country. The station's presenters often address Uganda's employers and unions directly, calling on them to put an end to child labour.
Today, we have come to tell you that the number has gone up to 365. These children have been taken away from the tea chambers, from the outgrowers, and are now in school studying.
ILO helps a lot when to put the program on the radio. Everybody listened, the parents, the guardians, and the children themselves.
Thanks to the work of NGOs, the media, and international institutions across the continent, more and more children are returning to school. This is a lesson in optimism and proof that mentalities can be changed.
As I mentioned earlier, our guest this week, physically disabled since the age of 3, has chosen to fight against the stigma that is wreaking havoc in Africa. It affects young people with motor, visual, auditory disabilities or victims of mental disorders. His young French association, Société Inclusive, was born in 2019 to help them integrate the corporate world. He entrusted his objectives to Laurent Soustras and Thierry Schiller.
Hello, Lukman Lanignon. Your association works to promote the inclusion of handicapped youth in Benin. How did you decide to start this mission?
Merci. Société Inclusive, effectivement, accompagne des jeunes en situation.
Thank you. Indeed, Société Inclusive, which means inclusive society, supports young people with disabilities in Benin. The idea of creating this association came to me when I was thinking about my company's business plan, because this year I created my company specialized in CSR and inclusion.
En réfléchissant à ce business plan, je me suis...
While thinking about this business plan, I realized that when talking about disability, we need to talk about two main aspects: disability according to the company and disability of youth.
For me,
it was clear that companies had the means to be able to pay for the advice of a consultant or a specialist on the subject. On the other hand, with regard to youth, I couldn't see myself proposing paid services to handicapped youth who could benefit from my counsel. I therefore decided to transform this part of my business plan into a non-profit association, hence the birth of Société Inclusive.
D'où la naissance de Société Inclusive.
So you started with Handy Time for the professional integration of handicapped youth. This is in Benin. How is it going?
The
Handy Time program is our flagship program. It was launched this year with the aim of helping to improve the employability of handicapped youth.
Des jeunes en situation de handicap. En effet, à travers des ateliers de coaching,
with coaching workshops on several topics such as putting together a CV, writing a cover letter, personal development, or even a job interview simulation.
We
were able to bring on board a number of local companies and help more than 100 handicapped young people.
Have you noticed some difficulties in these young people? Does the disability cause confidence problems, for example, for their career path?
Tout à fait, puisque généralement les jeunes en situation de handicap.
Absolutely, since generally handicapped youth also have an enormous lack of self-esteem and self-confidence.
En matière d'estime de soi, de confiance.
And it's for this reason, by the way, that among the themes addressed by the Handy Time coaching workshops, there is the theme of personal development, which aims to show these young people that a handicap is not an end in and of itself, and that it can be a break or a motor, and that they alone decide what to make of their handicap.
You are also in the process of setting up the Alado project in Porto Novo, providing educational support for handicapped school children. How is it going?
Faced
with the fact that very few young people with handicaps are able to have access to higher education, Société Inclusive wondered what to do to improve the number of handicapped youths who managed to go to universities. And it is in this context that the Alado project was born, which is being rolled out in Porto Novo. It is still in the initial phase, which will be completed during the course of the coming year. At the moment, there are a number of young people who are already benefiting from this academic support, which allows them to be able to ask for our assistance when they need to do school homework, for example, math exercises, a French presentation, and geography or history.
What kind of welcome have you received from the authorities, businesses, and the school systems?
Au Bénin, nous bénéficions d'un soutien institutionnel fort.
In Benin, we receive strong additional support. In fact, we are currently in discussions with the Ministry of Social Affairs in charge of disability in Benin to establish a partnership agreement.
Pour établir une convention de partenariat. De même, de nombreuses entreprises.
Likewise, many companies are already working with us, and others will certainly join us next year. And as for other handicap-related organizations, most of them also want to work with us because we have a different approach.
Elles veulent également travailler avec nous parce que nous avons une approche différente. En effet, il faut dire qu'en Afrique,
because it must be said that in Africa, when we talk about disability, the approach that is most emphasized is a welfare approach. That's to say, offering food to handicapped people.
Alors que Société Inclusive vient avec une nouvelle approche.
While Société Inclusive offers a new approach focused on human rights by saying that a handicapped person has the same rights as any other person in society, and society must do everything to allow this handicapped person the full exercise of his or her rights.
Is this a model that also appeals to people in France?
Bien sûr.
Of course, since if I take the case of the Handy Time workshops, right now, Orléans, the sister city of Parakou in Benin, is very interested in this project. And we are currently discussing, to the extent that it's possible, how to also initiate this program in the city of Parakou, which is the second largest university city in Benin.
You on Initiative Africa, welcome back to the second part of our show. We remain in Uganda, where a mobilization to help the visually impaired has been deployed. In this East African country, the blind are thus trained in computing to be competitive in the labour market. Thanks to text-to-speech software, visually impaired and blind people can now surf the internet and find employment more easily, a learning method that seems to be paying off. This is a report by our correspondent, Kenny Kiza.
Information and communication technology has become a necessity in everyday life. In many of the workplaces, employers insist on taking on people who are computer literate. This has left in the cold many potential employees without such skills. However, this is different for the blind and other visually impaired people in Uganda. A high-tech project has been established for them 5 kilometers outside the Ugandan capital, Kampala. Chireka High-Tech Center, the first of its kind in the country, is a brainchild of the Uganda National Association of the Blind. It caters for all categories of people with visual impairments. The center offers ordinary computer packages such as Introduction to Computer, Microsoft Word, Excel, and Internet, among others. The idea is to provide the blind with adaptable computer skills to enable them compete on the job market.
Because we're looking at the academic part of it, given the fact that these days we see everything is to do with the research, to do with what, but the prior aim was to make sure that blind persons compete on the job market just like any other person, with computer skills not being the only hindrance.
53-year-old Levi Etobite, a medical worker by profession, lost his vision in 1985. He was working at the country's main referral hospital, Mulago. Etobite was not computer literate by the time this tragedy befell him. Life has been hard for him ever since, as all would-be employers turned down his request for employment due to lack of computer skills. So, he had no choice but to enroll for computer lessons.
I found necessary to be computer literate so as to access information, because we were limited. We could not be, if it is only through computer literacy, that's where you could also maybe be able to get a job and get more information from the internet. Because the best was to know how to send your letters, read your letter, I mean, at least be able to write something and be able to send without having to buy a stamp, whatever.
Move the link button to activate.
Assistive technology, just as you hear assistive, at times we call it adaptive. It is a software which we install on the ordinary computers, because many people think that we use different computers, but the computers are the same. The only difference is that it is that software which talks. So when we put it on the computer, it enables a blind person to access all the information that he or she wants by way of touching and talking. So I would say we use the touch and talk method. But there are different softwares that we use. The most common one in this particular place is the one we call JAWS, which is JAWS, Job Access with Speech.
For Deborah Mazina Chibinge, the story is quite shocking. She lost her sight at 17 years due to severe malaria. She was in senior 4 by then. But, as the saying goes, disability is not inability. Deborah undertook a community-based rehabilitation course and later joined the NGO world. Her ambitions were even higher as she later took to politics. She is now a councillor representing people with disabilities at her district. Deborah does not regret acquiring computer skills at the high-tech center.
Because I was trying to look for a job, they were telling me that for us, we are not going to employ you because you don't have computer skills. Wherever you go, they ask you that, do you know computer? We say no. So that's why I decided to come and take this computer, to learn computer. It has helped me so much, especially in record keeping, and to record my information concerning people with disabilities in Uganda.
It was, however, not easy establishing the center. The Uganda Association of the Blind enlisted support from the Canadian Center for the Blind, which sent an instructor and technical support. Support was also received from Sight Savers International, all of which has helped the center to remain on course. Abubakar Kakaire Chirunda, a journalist by profession, travels 50 kilometers to the center whenever he has lessons. He has been visually impaired for 10 years now. He is optimistic that with the existence of this center, the future is bright for the blind.
I trained as a journalist and I graduated as a journalist, so all our work we deal with writing. So I thought it easy if I could learn this computer type of work, because they have got the talking part of it. So it could help me as I go to collect my news. I could just come and type on the computer, then I send it to my media house.
Manual devices have been made available to cater for students who cannot immediately access computers.
We have people who lose their sight when they are already mature and they don't know how to read and write Braille. So some of them are using what we call a brailler, Perkins brailler. So the Perkins brailler is the special machine which writes dots for a blind person to be in position to read and write. So it is a little bit different from the computer because for it is manual. You have to really use your energies and write things here and there. But that is the special way blind persons read and write. Now the computer is the way they can communicate to the sighted people. But with the brailler, they communicate to themselves.
The future for the blind in information and communication technology lies in more centers being set up to cater for the blind and people with various visual impairments in different parts of the country. A law compelling employers to install talking devices in computers used by the blind, once employed, would be a big boost to the center and its beneficiaries.
Delete button. Reply button.
Let's get back to our guest this week, Lukman Nanignon, for the final part of our interview for Initiative Africa. He tells us how Africa can break the stigma deadlock by learning to look at disability in a very different way. Listen to him.
Lukman Nanignon, your vocation came from your youth. Do you have the impression that disability is very poorly understood by African societies?
En Afrique, les personnes en situation de handicap souffrent de...
In Africa, people with handicap suffer from several stereotypes. It is common to see families with handicapped children hiding them out of sight.
Qui ont des enfants en situation de handicap, qui les cachent à l'abri du regard, puisque avoir un enfant de handicap...
Since having a child with a disability in Africa can be seen as shameful.
Donc oui,
so yes, there are traditions that carry a certain weight, or sometimes one can feel that having a child with a disability is a curse of nature.
What are the reasons, in your opinion?
Le poids des traditions, le manque de...
Strong belief in traditions, also lack of openness and fear of the other, the fear of the unknown, because we perceived being handicapped as something negative.
On le perçoit comme quelque chose de négatif, alors que...
Whereas I personally am convinced that beyond the handicap, there is an enormous potential in these people with disabilities.
What are the major developments on the continent in terms of disability discrimination in recent years? Has there been any progress?
Bien sûr, il y a eu des progrès, et heureusement d'ailleurs.
Of course, there has been progress, and fortunately there has been, in fact, under the impetus of the financial and technical partners of UN organizations such as the ILO, several African countries, including Benin, have adopted a disability law that promotes the inclusion.
De l'inclusion des personnes en situation de handicap, de l'insertion
and professional integration of handicapped people.
But in this African society that you know well, what are the difficulties still to be overcome in order to better understand the plight of the handicapped?
Ces dernières années, plusieurs avancées ont été observées.
While progress has been made in recent years, it must also be noted that most of these disability laws are not fully operational today.
Opérationnels aujourd'hui. Donc l'État, les autorités étatiques
So the state authorities have the obligation to do what is necessary to fully enable these different laws.
Également, il y a un effort considérable.
Equally, there is a considerable effort to be made with regard to improving public awareness in order to change how people see disability in our society.
Sur le handicap dans notre société.
This is how we will achieve a fully inclusive society.
Inclusive.
Are problems especially significant in rural areas?
Oui. Tout d'abord parce qu'en zone rurale, la plupart des personnes en situation de handicap.
Yes, first of all, because in rural areas, most people with disabilities have very little access to the authorities or other services that those who live in an urban area may have.
Situation de handicap qui vivent dans les régions urbaines, par exemple en Afrique. Et il ne faut pas oublier également qu'en Afrique...
We must also not forget that in Africa most states are centralized states, and therefore most of the services are located in the capitals.
La plupart des services. Donc une personne qui vit En zone rurale,
therefore, a person who lives in a rural area is not necessarily on the same playing field as a person living in the city in terms of accessibility or access to a number of essential services.
un certain nombre de services essentiels.
What would you say to a handicapped young African and to those who may subconsciously have a discriminatory approach?
Le handicap nous concerne tous. Et nul n'est à l'abri du handicap parce que
Disability concerns us all, and no one is immune to it because a disability can occur at any time in one's life.
les exemples sont légion de personnes qui ont acquis le handicap.
There are a vast number of people who have acquired a handicap during their lives or who, despite their disability, have continued along their life courses. For example, the current president of the German parliament, Wolfgang Schäuble, who, despite the fact that he is in a wheelchair, is still one of the most important German personalities. And there are many other examples.
Donc, pour ceux qui aujourd'hui portent toujours un regard
So, for those today who still have a negative view when it comes to disability, I call on them to change their outlook and to open up more to others and to diversity, because this is how we will achieve a handy, welcoming society, a tolerant society that everyone is able to fully integrate.
Handi accueillante, une société tolérante où chacun trouve pleinement sa place. Et pour ces jeunes en situation de handicap,
and for the handicapped youth who are wondering today whether they will be able to find their place in society, I want to say yes. It is up to them to choose what to do with their handicap, because disability often hides enormous potential. It is up to them to get to know each other better in order to know where their hidden talents lie and to work on expressing it better in order to be able to find their place in society.
Pour pouvoir trouver leur place dans la société.
Well, that's it. Initiative Africa is over for today, and of course you can find the interview of Lukman Maninho and the replay of our programs on our website africaonair.com, as well as on our social media channels. Feel free to share, like and comment with the hashtag Initiative Africa TV show, and don't forget, next week same time, same channel, I'll see you again with a new edition of Business Africa. Have a great week, everyone. Take care and goodbye.